Well, hey, friends, it's Carey Nieuwhof here with a special bonus episode of the Connexus Church audio podcast. And we're doing a special bonus episode because we have something really exciting happening at Connexus in the next few weeks. Starting Sunday, January 14th, we are starting a brand new series called The Problem of God. And it's all about facing the questions, the top questions, really, that skeptics ask about Christianity. And it's a big Sunday for us in a couple of ways. Number one, this is going to be a huge series. But number two, this is the first time that we are actually a 3-location church. That's right. Our brand new Midland location is opening Sunday, January 14th. They will be joining us live online along with Aurelia, along with Barry. We will be synced up between the locations. And we would love for you to get yourself to one of our locations in Midland, Aurelia, or Barry for the kickoff of the Problem of God series. It'll be happening at both of our services at 9 and 10:30. And you actually have a chance to give some input into what we're going to talk about. So watch our social channels, Connexus Church, just on Instagram, Facebook, and you will see that we're asking you to participate in a survey that just talks about how much of a problem various subjects are. For example, what about the whole science evolution thing? Or is there any evidence for God's existence? Or how about scripture? Like, can you trust it? There is this thing called the Christ myth, like Jesus. Was his death and resurrection real, or is it just mythical? Or how about evil and suffering, or hell, or even, how about this, sex? Like, a lot of people are like, hey, I don't buy what the Bible has to say about sex. That is a problem when it comes to me and God, or even hypocrisy or exclusivity. You see, people have a lot of challenges with Christianity, and what we want to do is tackle the top ones head on. Now, I'm going to be teaching through 5 of the 6 parts of the series, and I'm going to be basing it in part, well, obviously on Scripture and what I believe about Christianity, but I've found a recent book that came out last summer to be incredibly helpful. It's actually called The Problem of God, and it's by an author and a pastor who's become a friend of mine. His name is Mark Clark, and he leads Village Church in Vancouver, BC. They have multiple locations. They have churches in Calgary and across Vancouver. And Mark is actually a very, very smart theologian, a great pastor. Village Church is one of Canada's largest and fastest growing churches with over 5,000 people in attendance. And The Problem of God, in my view, is an incredible book. Mark's done a great job with this book, taking, really synthesizing a lot of thought and distilling in some very succinct chapters some of the key evidences for God as people engage the toughest questions on Christianity. Now, you're in for a double treat because, first of all, I'm going to bring you an interview that I did, an over hour-long interview I did with Mark Clark. This is in connection with my leadership podcast, and we're going to bring it direct to you. So this is a conversation I had with Mark last summer, just as Problem of God was getting ready to release, and we have a fantastic, wide-ranging conversation I want to share with you. But then some news. You want to make sure you show up at our campuses because Mark Clark is going to be here to wrap up the Problem of God series in February live at Connexus Church. So we're going to hear directly from Mark. I'm going to do the first 5 parts of the series. Then in February, Mark is going to be here. So it's going to be an incredible couple of months at Connexus. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that and to get you ready to take the survey, to tell your friends, to invite your friends, maybe even share this podcast with them because these are real issues. Here is my conversation with Village Church pastor and author of Problem of God, Mark Clark. Well, I'm excited to be with my friend Mark Clark today. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to be here with you, Carey.
Hey, so you're in Vancouver, I'm in Toronto. We got a few Canadians listening and a whole bunch of Americans. And I think this is a Canadian church leader that every American needs to get to know. Mark's a world-class leader. I love the way you speak. Has anybody ever told you this? Because we've sort of struck up a friendship over the last year. You sound like Vince Vaughn. Have you ever heard that?
Really?
Yeah. Is that like a good thing or a bad thing? Or is that pretty awesome?
That's a good thing. No, that's a great thing. I grew up memorizing Swingers and Made and, all the Vince Vaughn. And he's all improv, which is, mostly me too. So just on this
There's just a little bit of Vince Vaughn in there. That
right. That's
hear.
funny.
Mark's got a great style of preaching. And Mark, you've got a really amazing story. I mean, you're a pretty unlikely pastor. So give us Because this is very unusual, at least in the leaders that I've met. So talk about how you became a Christian, and then some of the challenges you've had too, just even with conditions that you struggle with leading a massive church.
Yeah, it's my parents. I was raised in a total non-Christian family, and I like to illustrate that by sharing the idea that my dad actually, named my brother with one T. His name's Matthew, so he wouldn't be biblical, and then he named me Mark 4 years later. So literally, never opened up a Bible.
I had no idea. Mark was the next book.
Yeah. What is this? I don't know. So no Bible, no church, no Jesus, no prayer, nothing in my home at all. First time I walked into a church, I was 19 and felt called into ministry the same year. Became a Christian about a year or two before I ever walked into a church, and just kind of had to open up the Bible and figure Christianity out for myself, but also explored it, as my book talks about, through kind of a very rational, scientific, philosophical, historical thinker. And so I wanted Christianity to actually make sense and be rational. So I went through an exploration of studying all those different angles to see if Christianity was something I wanted to do. And so my parents got divorced when I was about 8 or 9. And that trauma, the doctor tells me, created a situation where I got Tourette syndrome, which is the kind of thing where you get all kinds of tics and habits that progress. And that developed into obsessive compulsive disorder. So I would literally be the kind of guy who would like swear to myself, like just randomly swear in classrooms and whatever. And you tend, the one job you're not going to have in life is being a preacher if you throw F-bombs
you start
around,
dropping the F-bomb in the middle of your message.
Yeah, it just tends not to, take off, or it's the rated R church that you can't get into. And so anyway, so it's kind of crazy that God took me from that, called me into ministry when I was 19, and just started preaching and pastoring and went to school. Got a desire for academia and really wanted to become a scholar and do a PhD at Oxford. And so there was a step to get there, was to move out to Vancouver and go to Regent College and get a master's degree in New Testament. And while I was here, just felt called to abandon the PhD and to start a church. So I was working at a church at the time that sent me with about 30 people. We started out in this little gym. Actually, it started out with about 16 people in my townhouse, and the church gave me a few more. And we went to this gymnasium and just started preaching Jesus and saying, hey, let's try to reach culture and reach some people. So over the last 7.5 years, that small group of people has grown to about 5,000 people across 3 different locations. And we're just about to plant 2 more locations, one in Calgary and one in Montreal. Very early on, God gave me a vision to plant like across our country and to do something that was really impact our country. So I know a lot of Americans have no idea where Calgary and Montreal are, but just, they're across the It's like LA and New York. Yeah.
But it's sort of like what Hillsong is doing, just picking, not necessarily cannibalizing your existing campuses, although you have 2 or 3 locations in the Vancouver area. But like Calgary's, how many miles away is Calgary? 1,000?
A lot.
A lot. And Montreal.
And then that's the other side of the country. So, yeah.
There's a lot of cool stuff going on in Montreal. Like Josh Gagnon, who's been a guest on the podcast. He's got a site in Montreal now, and he's an American, like New England pastor out of, he's in 5 states, I think, now. And so this is kind of cool to see the multi-site movement start to roll national, not just regional, which is great. And in our country, man, where 95% of people don't go to church, it is so needed and so welcome. And Mark would be leading, I think in the US, one of the, a very fast growing large church, but in Canada, one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing, and certainly one of the largest churches in our country, which is great. And, I love that combination, and it shows in your new book, The Problem of God, of like almost Keller-like academia, with the heart and the street sense of a street preacher. Do you know what I mean? That kind of like, it's this really, it's in your preaching, it's in your communication style, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think God's given you a really unique gift set that's kind of cool. How did you, so when you got converted, you kind of skipped over a few things, not on purpose, but like, you were living a pretty godless life prior to walking into a church, true?
Yeah. Did the whole drug thing and, all the stuff that you're doing as a teenager that, you don't know Jesus, and got some pretty tight situations, stealing a lot and breaking into cars and stealing from parents and running in stuff with the cops. And And so, yeah, first time I did drugs, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and then it cycled back around when I was in my teen years, and it just got bad. But by God's grace, before it really became a thing that could have ruined me and set me on a very different path in life, some great, God kind of just interfered and did some cool things in my life, even before I was a Christian. So just looking back at certain scenarios. So yeah, it's really amazing. But yeah, that was my past growing up, and God, saved me out of it and put me on a new path. So
you were 19 when you became a Christian, and how old when you planted Village Church?
I was 29 when I planted the church.
That was 7.5 years ago. So
yep.
Still young in your journey. Your approach to apologetics is a little bit different. Describe it for us. In The Problem of God, it's I got a shelf full of apologetics books, but I admire the way you tackled it. And you've also preached that, right? You preached through most of that content at Village Church, correct?
Yeah. Actually, we started preaching it in the fall. We wanted to leverage, the renewed interest people have around their schedules and whatever. So, and we're doing it again this fall. We're doing a series based on the book. And it's basically, in the past, I've taken 5 or 6 questions, the top challenges that skeptics, post-Christian culture, secular thinkers, atheists, agnostics have against Christianity, the world I grew up in, all the questions I had, the reasons my, friends and family didn't want anything to do with God or church or whatever. Yeah. What are those? And then let's answer them. Let's speak to them. And so I remember the first time third time we had done this, I think we grew by 800 people in a week just by offering the fact that we're doing a series and we're going to answer these questions. And those people never went anywhere. They stayed. And so we realized that these questions are still massively in the mind of people out on the street, the regular Joe. So we got to be hitting them. Let's not ask and answer questions that, we just as Christians are talking about that no one in the real world's actually thinking about. Let's hit the stuff that these guys actually care about and think about, and let's answer them through reason and history and psychology and philosophy.
The one that I haven't seen in a lot of apologetics books is sex. And you've got a whole chapter on sex.
Right.
I've never really thought of sex as an apologetics issue, but I totally get it now. Once I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. This is why, there are Christians who don't want to be Christians because of what they think the Bible says about sex,
sure.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So just walk us through how you would handle a subject with sex, because clearly, like any church, you got a few people who used to go to another church, but you have a ton of unchurched people, a lot of young adults who attend Village Church at your locations. And sex is a huge issue for anybody who preaches or leads a church today.
Yeah. It's probably one of the more unique parts of the book. There's, 3 or 4 chapters that probably no other apologetics book that I've ever read has. And so it's this question of, there's a lot of scholars and regular Joe people who go, I don't want anything to do with Christianity because of its teaching on sex. Whether that's, hey, most of the time it's, hey, I'm not allowed to have sex with anybody I want. I'm not allowed to have sex wherever I want. This is a freedom issue. The highest priority for us is kind of the autonomous self that can do whatever it wants. And anybody who tells me any different, they're holding me back. They're oppressing me. And this is some ancient teaching about, husbands and wives in the context of marriage. And that's, God is anti-sex. And so they stay away from Christianity based on that alone. Forget any big philosophical reason. Really,
is the Bible true? Like, any of that stuff is just like, I'm not giving up my lifestyle.
I'm not giving them. I want to go to college and have sex with whoever I want. So, man, following Jesus would kind of suck in that scenario. So, trying to give an ethic that goes, man, number one, God is not anti-sex. Where in the Bible, I mean, church history has kind of shown this. God wants 2 people to have sex when they want to procreate and have kids, and that's it. And make sure the lights are off and everything's, and it's like this, like grandfather version. And that's how they picture God thinking. And so in the book, I go, whoa, first issue that needs to be dealt with is God is very pro-sex. No one's more pro-sex in the universe than God. He's the one who set it up. He's the one who crafted the body to have these maximum moments of pleasure. He created scenarios that are just pleasure-based. They have no reproductive value. And I literally use this evangelistically. I go, don't you want to know the God who created orgasms? Don't you want to know the God? Like, let's go. This is someone I want to connect to, someone who thought this up. And so first off, and we got to show that God is very pro-sex. And so I show, the passage, tons of passages in the Bible that talk about this, where God isn't saying in the passage, hey, make sure you have sex so you can have lots of kids. Yes, that's there. It's take pleasure in one another, drink of one another, enjoy one another, all this beautiful poetry that he's telling. And it's very important, a husband and a wife. And so what I talk about is the long game, even from a societal standpoint, is husband and wife together, excluding sex for that relationship is the best way toward our joy. And I go into a whole bunch of great information about, from a secular perspective, about the case for marriage and why married couples actually have the best sex lives.
Yeah, you're quoting stats in there and everything, right? About married couples having better quality sex and more sex.
100%, and total secular stuff. So the chapter blows up the whole, Seinfeld or Friends paradigm, where the real good sex is when you're single in the city and you're having sex with everybody, and the maximum amount of pleasure. Because good sex, not just sex, but good sex takes hard work and learning each other's bodies, and certain things need to be, you need to have certain levels of like you're calm and you can, whatever.
Right.
And the amount of sex and the pleasure of sex all is best in the context of marriage, even according to secular statistics. So I just come out and say, look, God is very pro-sex, and the best place for it is in the context of marriage.
Yeah, you also attack in that chapter, you attack this idea that sex is God, right? This whole idea that people have where, sex is the ultimate expression of who we are as human beings. It's what makes us human. First of all, how widely held do you find that view among people that you would encounter at your church? You have thousands of them in that age demographic, younger adults. And then how do you tackle that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two levels. The one level is they're not going to obviously say sex is my God, but they live like it, meaning their sexual choices, their pleasure, it drives their life. It drives the decisions they make, whether that's sleeping around or pornography or whatever it is. It really functionally is their God, and that's key. And then there's people who they make it the definitive issue about their identity. And so whether that's same-sex attraction or whether that's, hey, I'm not going to restrict this to marriage, or I'm going to do it this way, it's the definitive thing about themselves. And so I show them that this is not the way God intended it. It's a massive part of us, 100%. It's huge. We can't deny that. But it's not the central issue of our identity. And once we can step away from that and begin to see there's a whole bunch of other orbiting factors about our lives than just our sexual identity, then we can have a better perspective of where sex fits in the context of the priority of our life.
So play this out in the context of actual pastoral ministry. I mean, Vancouver's a very progressive city. The views that you express would be extremely countercultural in Vancouver and pretty much in any major city anywhere these days. How do you find, let's pick on younger adults under 35. How are they responding to the message, particularly singles? How do you find them respond to that kind of an ethic or an apologetic? I find that they respond well to it for two reasons. First, they know it's coming from a pastoral heart of experience of me literally sitting with hundreds of couples as they've gone through stuff in their life. And now they're in their mid-30s, and now they're in their 40s, and they made these choices and these ones and these ones. And I'm able to preach from a place of, listen, I just sat down with Joe and Jane, and they hit this and this and this. And they know that my heart is to see them flourish. And so I'm able to tell, as I tell in the book, stories about couples who've been married and, she doesn't have as much pleasure as he does. She doesn't hit climax. She doesn't know. And so it's getting into those things with them and saying, why is that? Challenging some of their assumptions. And then 2-3 weeks later, these couples getting back to me going, oh my goodness, once we crack that open, now we've hit these pleasure points. Now our sex life is growing. Now there's certain, and then I sit with them, how many times are you doing this per week? Okay, here's what statistically, here's what should be happening. Set goals for yourself. Because these couples aren't thinking and talking about it, and the church isn't thinking and talking about it. So I talk about it in the book.
How often should you be having sex per week if you're in a somewhat functional thing? Here's some goals to shoot for. Here's some stats around what people are doing. Couples aren't talking about, Carey, when you're hanging out with your friends, you're probably not sitting around 4 or 5, 6 couples and go, hey, Clark, how many times you guys have sex a week? See, this is what I'm talking about, Tony. What is it? You're not having that conversation. So to be able to drag it out in a book, people aren't willing to ask the question. So once they see it, now they got something to go, okay, what about this? So the young adults are seeing that experience and going, okay, there's something here. Yeah. And then secondly, of course, and this is probably more important than that, is they're seeing all the theology come from the text. That what's authoritative over me is God and the Bible and the meta narrative of Scripture, not me. I don't get to make this stuff up. So if I could just make up a sexual ethic, then I just make it up. But unfortunately, or of course, fortunately, but we have an authority over us that says, no, you can't pick and choose. Here's the deal. Live under it. And so once someone can see that, then they see that you're not making this stuff up yourself. Then if they have an issue, they got to deal with God or the Bible. They don't have to deal with me. Yeah. It's like when I sit with a couple might come in and one of them's a Christian and one of them's not a Christian. And so I'm like, okay, I can't actually, with conviction before God marry you if one of you is a Christian and one of you aren't. If you're both not Christians, just tell me that. I can
do the wedding.
I can do that. But and so now when the non-Christians, I can't believe this, you're so judgmental, the church is like this. And if I'm able to open up 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, talk about unequally yoked, and why this and why that and what Paul meant. Now all of a sudden he's got to deal with the text. He's not dealing with me because I ate some bad pizza and I'm in a bad mood. I have a bigger authority that I have to answer to. And pointing people toward that is the key part of this, where now they walk away and they go, they might be jacked up mad about it, but at least they're not mad at me about it.
Right. No, that's good to know. So Mark, tell me, with a church your size, how often are you counseling in a typical month or a week? Because usually once a church gets above 1,000, a lot of pastors just bail on that. But why do you do it, and what's your practice?
Yeah, I certainly do it less now because we have actual legitimate registered counselors who
like real people who went to school for that. Okay.
Yeah, it's like PhD in clinical psychology that we hired to literally do counseling. So he's got a lineup that's 3 months long. So once in a while I'll do it for, people still, because it keeps me in understanding what people are going through. And it helps me to be able to connect with them, and then it helps them to be able to hear from, okay, there's someone on the stage preaching and teaching the Bible, and usually it's got some evangelistic measure to it for me, where there's a husband or a wife who's not really coming to the church, or they're not really into it, or they're not Christians, and they're now married and they're having tensions, and an email comes in, and I just get a heart for, man, there's an evangelistic angle to this where I think I could really speak into it, and then I'll do it. So that's, I'm not doing it as much as I used to when we were, 500 people and or 1,200. It was just me. I hired my second pastor and we were 1,200 people. So I was definitely doing it more then. But it's a great way to actually connect with people. And what I'm seeing are the brokenness of these marriages and two people who are like, man, I gotta figure my life out. And so oftentimes it's sex, money, communication / conflict. Those are the three big things that we hit and deal with.
In your book, you also tackle some of the classic apologetic things, like, for example, hell, which, I just find it gets harder and harder to try to convince people about hell all the time. What's your approach to that?
My approach to it is first, as I talk about in the book, my father passed away when I was 15, and he was 47. Died of lung cancer, never even called me and told me he was sick. The hospital called and said, your dad just died. And I'm like, I haven't talked to my dad. What are you talking about? So I show up at his funeral and I'm sitting there over his casket. I'm 15 and I'm asking the big questions of life and destiny and morality and existence and meaning and all the rest of it. But here's so this is not a hypothetical question for me. I'm not coming from some Christian family where everybody, my great-great-great-great-grandfather was a pastor and everybody since has been Christian and gone to heaven. I'm dealing with a father who likely, I don't know what went on in his heart, but if he didn't become a Christian, is in hell. So this isn't some hypothetical thing. So
Wow.
my desire would be to go, okay, this doesn't exist. Or let's take an annihilationist view where one day it's all going to disappear, or a universalist view where, they get, a purgatory view where they dealt with it for a few years and now they're all in heaven and so on. The problem is, again, coming back to the authority, I keep bumping up against the Bible, which doesn't really let me deal with it that easily. And so what I find with people is there's a couple things about it. Obviously, Jesus taught about it, it's biblical. So then we got to figure out what to do with that. Secondly, I find that if you look around the world, really the only people who have a problem with hell are people who are sitting in the Western world in comfort in the suburbs, drinking lattes at Starbucks, going, here's a part of Christianity I don't like. I don't like a God who has wrath or likes to judge or whatever. The problem is, you go to some village in Africa where the kids and women get raped and murdered by men who burn down a village and take off. Then you walk up to those people and say, by the way, the men who did this will never, ever feel the justice of God in their life. And all those people in the village go, well, I don't want a God like that then. I refuse to worship a God if there is no hell, if there is no judgment. So who are we to sit in our, enlightened mind around drinking our lattes, figuring out which doctrines we like and we don't like, when the 80% of the world would say, hold on, if you get rid of that doctrine, I'm out. Because it's a priority for me that God would be a God of justice. Now, we're not supposed to necessarily mete out death and judgment in the present. That's the whole point of Romans 12. But once you have a God who is going to, as Miroslav Volf talks about, now you don't have to carry out in the present. So actually, hell is a deterrent toward violence in the present. It's a deterrent toward us thinking that we need to get our justice now, because there is going to be justice one day. And so not everybody's going to have the exact same eternity. Not every guy who committed genocide in the world is just going to go to, it's just, how offensive is the idea? Walk up to a Palestinian and a Jewish guy and a Muslim. I say, oh, don't worry, we're all going to end up in the same place holding hands. It's like, yeah, what happened to my family that died for this? What do you mean we're all going to end up? What are you talking about? Most of the world actually finds it completely offensive to say there's no hell, or there's no judgment of some sort, some vengeance, some justice that's going to be meted out on everybody in the end. But we somehow came along and wanted to change it. So the first issue is Bible. Second issue is just not being ethnocentric in our thinking. And then third is to realize justice has to be served. And we all want justice. If a guy cuts in line, we want justice. I get pretty jacked up angry about people who cut in line. We all have this sense of justice that stirs in us, and the doctrine of hell really tries to explain, okay, here's what God's going to do on an infinite, eternal basis about, wrongdoing, evil, sin that's not dealt with through the blood of Christ.
But doesn't the whole thing, like when you talked about, you have a Jew, a Palestinian, you have a Muslim, and they're like, what is this thing about we're all going to be holding hands into the future? Doesn't that play into the Christopher Hitchens and so on, who would say, well, you see, religion really is the source of all division. It really is the source of all bad in the world. How do you tackle that?
Yeah. Well, you go back into history and you show that, Christopher Hitchens' deduction conclusions were worse. If you go through the numbers of, Stalin and Hitler and Pol Pot and, the Cambodian stuff and Khmer Rouge and all this stuff, you see what atheism did, and you add up and I actually talk about this in one of the chapters of the book, the chapter on exclusivity. And I talk about, if you add up all of the deaths, the religious driven deaths throughout history, and you compare them to the deaths that were brought about through atheistic worldviews, and not even close. Not even close. Like, you just take this century alone. So Hitchens' conclusions are actually worse, because now you're removing any kind of, well, there's a million reasons why atheistic conclusions drive, genocide and mass killings like Stalin's and the Khmer Rouge and Hitler and so on. So the reality is atheism's not going to be a good answer to that, because we always transcendentalize something. So if we don't transcendentalize God and think there's some moral fabric and framework through which to do stuff, then we're going to transcendentalize money or the state. nationalism, power, sexual identity, whatever it is, we're going to make it God, and it's going to drive what we do on a microcosm and macrocosm of whole nation states getting together and being driven through certain things. So, I just don't think atheism is a great answer. It's no better. And religion, for the most part, of course there's disagreements and they're gonna fight about things. But that's what I love about Christianity in the marketplace of ideas. Here you have, in the midst of all the different religions, you have a leader whose core ethic, this isn't some peripheral teaching. Mm-hmm. The core ethic is you die for your enemy, and you pray for your enemy, and you go on a cross and you say it is finished, and you tell your follower to put away the sword and not kill people. How would it be then that Christianity, and I talk about this in the book, I go through the witch burnings and the Crusades, and I show that all of them were straying from anything even close to Christianity, because here is Jesus dying for his enemies, and that's the most beautiful word. Take the word religion off the table. That's just that group of ideas contrasted with that group of ideas, and that one is the best. It's the most freeing. It's the most beautiful. Dying for enemy, never pulling sword out to cut, and so, whatever the debates are about religion, this and that, Christianity in the marketplace of ideas is certainly the most beautiful, most freeing, most forgiving. And that's what the point of the book is. Christianity is the best. Take every religion, agnosticism, atheism, line them all up, and let's see how Christianity stands out.
Yeah, and clearly you're there because you believe that. It wasn't something you were raised in at all. One of the things you've said several times, and I mean, I think a lot of listeners would agree with it, I would agree with it, is your view is informed by Scripture, that you stand under Scripture, not above Scripture, et cetera, et cetera. Most Christians would totally agree with that. There is an argument, a strand of thought that says that apologetics is changing, that, textual criticism, for example, that this is the most widely attested ancient document in history, that there's a growing sense among post-Christian millennials and younger Generation Z who would say, yeah, okay, that's great. So it's the most widely attested ancient manuscript in existence. So what? Still don't like it. I don't like what it teaches. I don't like that. How are you tackling the authority of Scripture when it comes to a postmodern, post-Christian generation?
Yeah. Well, first you got to kind of explain that, truth and actual history does matter. And that's pretty, the whole postmodern idea of relative truth and relative morality and so on falls apart pretty quickly. I remember I used to work at Michael's Arts and Crafts store.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they have those in the States. And, they do. Because my training video when I started working there was someone from like the South. And it was like, hello and welcome to Michael's. And so then I had that in my brain the whole time. Hello. So anyway, I wear my red apron and, not have a clue where anything was. And so anyway, I was working with this guy and he said, no, morality is completely socially constructed. And we can't ever say just because we believe something's wrong that someone else would, that we should tell them it's wrong because they have their own beliefs.
Very Canadian, very postmodern, and increasingly American. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, well, okay, let's me, you, and your sister go down to some village in South America. And, the people there don't believe in loving your neighbors. They believe in eating them. And they grab your sister and they kill her and they put her on a, spit and they turn around a fire and they eat her. Based on your philosophy, you could not say they had done something decisively wrong. All you could say is that they did something that you don't happen to like, but you're not going to project your values onto them. And I said, are you willing to live with that reality? And he went kind of in a corner and he was, I see your point. And so it's pretty quick, if a guy's telling me, he doesn't believe in, truth or whatever, I'll just chop him in the neck. And then when he tells me he doesn't like it, I'll say, oh, no, but I like it. It's my thing. It's fine. I know you don't like it, but I like it. So don't try to project your values on me. And I'll just keep chopping him in the Adam's apple until he gets upset and leaves. So obviously we don't live like this. No one lives like this. It's stupid. Right. And so, the only truth is the idea that there is no such thing as truth. That falls apart pretty. You're sawing off the branch you're sitting on. So once we come to a conclusion that no, truth matters, not saying I have it, just saying let's conclude together the truth and history, what actually has happened in the past matters. and we can get there over a couple coffees or whatever. But once we get there, then all of a sudden the historicity and the legitimacy of biblical text matters again. And this is a unique thing about Christianity again. Christianity isn't a value system. It's not a bunch of precepts. It's not esoteric teachings. It's not principles of life. That's what all the other religions are. It's based on a historical moment, meaning the death and, of course, the resurrection, that if that moment is proven false, then Christianity goes away. No other religion is like that. Every other religion is just like philosophy and ideas and law, and nothing can ever kill it. But literally, if they found the bones of Jesus, then Christianity is over. We go home and it's done. And so we got to understand that. Yeah, it's done. I remember listening to a guy who told a story that there was this church and they didn't want him putting drums in the church. And so they had this big debate about drums. And the one guy got up and he said, if Jesus knew we were putting drums in our church, he'd be rolling over in his grave. And the guy's like, we got bigger problems if Jesus is rolling over in his grave, like Christianity's over. Anyway, so if that's true, then Jesus isn't primarily a religious teacher talking about esoteric principles. But it's based on historical moments. So now history matters. And if history matters, then truth matters. And we got to find out what is most true. And so anyway, so I do find that when I line up the different manuscript stuff, the stuff I talk in the book, where I talk about how it's the most legitimate in antiquity. It's the most legitimate manuscript. The people trust it. Even scholars, secular scholars, look at the Bible, Old Testament, New. They go, man, literally there is nothing like this thing. And it's been proven over and over and over again. Whether they're reading it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, whether they believe Jesus is who he said he is a separate issue. But as far as attestation and reliability goes.
They find, and I'm telling you, there were people telling us, Carey, 10 or 15 years ago, that none of this stuff was going to matter to the general populace anymore. It does. I hit against it every day. I was sitting across from a guy the other day. We were arguing about Christianity. He's like, dude, there's no way the Bible's legit. The New Testament, if you could convince me the New Testament was legit, then I got to give it a hearing. Because if Jesus really walked on water, are you joking? If he did these things, which I think are all mythology and legend, as the guy was talking about, too, and then, but if they actually happened, then I have to at least go, okay, should I actually give my life to this? And so, yeah, they were telling us 10, 15 years ago, none of this stuff was going to matter anymore. And I have found, whether it's my church growing through preaching that addresses these issues constantly, or hitting the 10 questions that I hit in the book and answering them, they do matter. And people are becoming Christians. I mean, we've seen 1,100 people get baptized in the last 7 years, which in Canada is crazy. Yeah. It's a move of God. It's honestly, there's good no bananas, credit, that we have good bananas. No credit we take for it. It's purely God, but it's us, preaching the Bible and constantly asking the 10 questions that are in this book and raising them and doing our best to answer them. And people are connecting with it and going, that's what changed my life, because those are the 3 things I couldn't come to ever believe in God because of those things. And you address them and they sat in my soul and I got it.
So interesting. I would agree that apologetic series, I've done a couple in the last 5 years. They deliver way more than you think. Totally. They will. Yep. So 10 issues, we won't get to all of them today. What's 1 or 2 others that you think, man, these are the pain points or the curiosity points that people are feeling that anybody who cares about the Christian faith and sharing it with people outside of it should pay attention to?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the chapters we address science, God's existence, the Bible, the Christ myth, which is, the whole idea that Jesus wasn't actually a historical figure because, of course, Dionysus and Horus and Mithras, they're all born on December 25th, crucified, 12, fed 5,000, have all the same exact characteristics of Jesus. Ergo, Jesus wasn't real. Evil and suffering, hell, sex, hypocrisy, exclusivity, and the issue of Jesus himself. And so I find starting out with God's existence with people, or the idea that science negates Christianity and God altogether.
Yeah, science is huge for people. I hear that all the time. Walk us through the 3 to 5 minute version of how you're tackling that with, again, a highly educated crowd in a major city.
Yeah. Well, the best thing to do is actually, use science. And so science over and over again is the deeper it goes, whether it's cosmology with Big Bang philosophy, and I talk about this in the book, that, back in the ancient world, Plato, Aristotle, these guys, they always believed in contingency, which is, something begins to exist has to have a cause. And so we always believed, so what was the uncaused infinite thing? And everybody thought it was the universe. The universe was the eternal, infinite thing that never had a cause outside of itself, until 100 years ago. And Edwin Hubble looked through his telescope and went, oh, wait a minute, the actual universe had a beginning. 15 billion years ago, the universe came into existence, and all matter, space, time, energy in an instant came into existence, and it continues to expand. And it's crazy because the random Joe thinks that space was there, and then the Big Bang kind of happened, and the universe has been kind of going back. No, but space itself is moving. I mean, it blows my mind thinking about it. But so space is moving, but what's on the? I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, what is it moving into? I know. That's where my brain starts to melt.
Carey.
I know.
Anyways, so cosmology said, no, the universe began to exist. We know when it began to exist. So if everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has to have a cause, and the cause can't be matter, because matter began to exist. We know when it began to exist. So it has to be mind, which is beautiful because Jesus taught God is spirit, in John chapter 4. So you have this reason, rational, because people go, I don't want to believe in God because it's irrational. No, actually, the evidence keeps pointing us to the existence of a mind that transcends nature, that began everything in an instant. And the other layer to this that people don't often understand is there's certain, laws of physics that would have had to be dialed in to the precise point for the universe not to have collapsed back into itself and just become a hot fireball, right? But here's the crazy thing. If you keep pushing it, they talk about these 100, and Francis Collins talks about the 122 dials that would have been had to zoned into the millionth for anything to ever come into existence. But to push it back, and the chances of that are crazy without a mind actually doing it. But there's another layer to that, which is, and this blew my mind when I started reading about this, that those dials would have already had to have existed. Because if they can't come into existence at the Big Bang, or they can't do their effect, they would have had to be already in working. Who put them? What's happening? Because they have to play their role once the Big Bang happens. Anyways, so as science delves deeper and deeper into cosmology, into biology, the amount of information in cells and DNA, like coded, actual intellectual information, needs to be in these. Darwin didn't have that. Darwin was walking around with a microscope. He did observational science. He ripped apart birds and looked at the way that, a lot of crazy, amazing conclusions he came up with, but he's not dealing with DNA. This stuff came along, a long time after him. Now we're looking at DNA strands. We're looking at, the amount of information. And so as science goes, whether it's the telescope or the microscope,
the macro or the micro. Yeah.
Yeah. It is like, man, this keeps pointing to an intelligent mind who created these things. We got to deal with this. So when I'm with my scientific friends, it's actually, and this is why, Leslie Newbegin points out that there are more atheists in the humanities and the sociological disciplines in university than there are in the sciences. Because in the sciences, when you're dealing with cosmology and biology, you can't get away from it. It's like there is something there. But if you're just in the humanities, like whatever.
So I think you're right. There's a lot of people that I've met, Mark, at our church and beyond, who are like, what, if I have to give up science, I can't become a Christian or whatever. And without trying to blow up your inbox or my inbox, any thoughts on how to tackle the whole 7-day literal creation thing, which I know has a whole camp, versus,
the fifth, Carey.
Is it a metaphor? Okay, you can plead the fifth. You can plead the fifth. How do you handle that?
Kidding. Well, I would do, the day is yom in the Hebrew, and it means like a period of time, an epoch.
An eon, an epoch.
So I think, God gave us these 7 days as a rhythm for life, and of course, you go back into Genesis, it's so beautiful because it's all Israel focused, and it's what they're doing in the land and what they're doing in the temple. And it's all this Eden's, this temple. And there's all these layers of such beautiful, and what the creation order and what it's supposed to do and be, and what that seventh day is for, and why it's important that he made us on the sixth, and Sabbath and rest and systems, and when you're in Egypt and all that. I mean, there's beautiful, layers of what's going on. But I think, the point is it was from God. It was systematized. It was this. He was setting up the days for us to live in a certain way. But I don't think you need to push it into a stark literalism that says, hey, it had to be a 24-hour period. Because actually, if you read it, there's certain things that happen after other things that wouldn't actually work. Like, there's things that were made before, like the sun. And there was like plants around and needed certain things, but the sun doesn't get created till later. So I think there's better ways to actually structure it where day 1, 2, and 3 are actually like the containers. And then he actually, if you look at 3, 4, and 5 and you line them up as a parallel, he fills the containers each time. So it's like he makes the sky in day 1, but he doesn't make the sun and the moon and stuff till day 4. And then he makes like the ocean in day 2, and he doesn't make the whales and stuff till day 5. And then he makes the earth, and then he makes man, and then they're all paralleled together as containers and fillers. So I think there's more poetry going on and beauty. I mean, again, so I wouldn't push that into a stark literalism that says, look, he must mean day in the same way we would mean it.
Well, and I think we have to be careful, as I think through this issue and teach through this issue, that we don't allow the what and the how to obliterate the more important questions, which are the who and the why. And that is what's happening in the debate, is the how and the what, and the people who are just crazy on one side or the other refuse to ask the deeper questions. And the question I think Genesis is ultimately designed to answer is who and why.
I agree with you, because that document is written as a subversive document against the Egyptian empire, who would worship. I mean, here you've got Egypt and Babylon, and they're going to worship the stars. And the Genesis account goes, oh, he made the stars also. It's like Yahweh created the thing you worship. And here's how he did it. And here's who really we're supposed to worship. Now, I don't think that then means that you say that you stretch it into, I think, there weren't really a literal Adam and Eve and so on. I think there were literally Adam and Eve. I think that's a legitimate historical thing.
So why would you say that?
Well,
I'm disagreeing with you. I'm just asking the question.
Well, I think, other than the fact that, of course, Jesus affirms those kind of things later, and as does Paul does. I think you have to be, there's the genre, when you're in a particular genre, there's moments where the genre is trying to do a poetic thing, and then there's moments where it's going, no, this is actually a thing. And so it's trying to, of course, people who freak out about this kind of stuff. Well, if you say that there, then the gospel falls apart, or that means, what is Noah not real? And so it's like, no. You got to be able to immerse yourself in the text and understand it so much that when it's making a point that is, stark literal, like, you got human beings, and here's the 2 first human beings, and here's their role, and here's who they are, and they're made in the image of God, and they're walking with God. And then when it's flexing a little bit. It's the same with apocalyptic literature. I mean, most people are willing to go, parts of Ezekiel and Isaiah and Revelation, like, these aren't stark literal things. When Jesus comes back in Revelation 19 and he's got a sword between his mouth, he doesn't actually, like, between his teeth have a sword. We know that. And he's a lion, and then he's a lamb. He's not going to actually have hooves. This is apocalyptic literature. This is imagery built on imagery to convey a theological point. And so it's a matter of getting into that literature and understanding the flow of it.
And, we never question it in the New Testament, because it'll say, Jesus was walking along the road one day with his disciples, and he said to them, a man had 2 sons. Well, we just flipped. One was a literal event. Sure. He was walking down the road one day. Was there a man who had 2 sons? Well, not like, hey, look at that guy with 2 sons. He's telling you a story. He's telling you a parable. But there have been a million guys who have had 2 sons, and we all recognize ourselves in the story. So the Bible does toggle between genres on a regular basis. One of the things that really impressed me, Mark, and I think people have picked it up even in the interview, is You're very, very glued to reality. I mean, the sex chapter is great. It talks, specifically about the history of prostitution, why, you even quote Dubner and Levitt in Freakonomics saying, prostitution is actually much less common than it was 100 years ago because guys will get sex for free if they can. And guess what?
Yeah.
People are giving it up after the sexual revolution.
Right.
And then,
yeah.
and then you
Second
quote
date.
C.S. Lewis and Aquinas and so on and so forth. You're fairly well read. Is that like book research, or is that something you try to carry into the pulpit on a regular basis? And then what does explain the rhythms behind that? Because you've got a wide variety of sources.
Yeah, I just read a lot, and it's based on passion. And it comes into the pulpit, but not in a formal, let me quote Dubner and Levitt, let me quote Gladwell right now. Let me quote, Bible scholar Augustine or whatever. It flows just as thinking that I think if you read enough, the stuff just becomes part of how you think and how you teach and preach and write. And then you cite stuff when you're citing it and you're like, okay, this idea is taken from here and you're footnoting it or whatever. But so in preaching, I try not to distract the audience with a bunch of, I might say, hey, I got this idea from this or whatever. But I'm not stopping a lot and reading direct quotes, maybe one a sermon, maybe, but that'd even be a lot.
No.
So yeah.
Okay. So you're a young guy, married, 3 daughters?
3 daughters. Yep.
3 daughters.
Keeps me busy. Yeah.
All young, between the ages of what and what?
I got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
There you go. And
they're trying to get me to get a dog, Carey.
Oh yeah, I've seen that on Instagram. So I'm with you. Don't give in. Don't give in. Don't get a dog. Enjoy your freedom. Anyway,
sail.
You lost that one.
Yeah, it's done.
So there's that, and then you also lead a rapidly growing church that's expanding across the country. How do you find time to read, and what is the particular rhythm that gets you into that space where you are reading constantly? Because I honestly, people think I read way more than I do. I've always got something on the go, but it's like, well, 5 years, finished a book. That was good. Not quite,
right.
But,
yeah.
Maybe read 8 this year, 9.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're different. We're different people. As I listen to you speak, and you're an amazing communicator, Carey, you're a very type A person. I mean, you got stuff in order, man. Because that's how you produce. You get up at 5 o'clock and you write, and that's how, I can't understand how you produce as much. I'm like, how has this guy got 3 blogs out today with the 10 points of being a better leader? And I can't think up 2 points. I haven't, Carey, it's insane. But the way you do that is by organizing your life in a very structured way.
I am very structured.
And that's not me. I'm way more fluid.
Cool.
And so I'd probably benefit a ton from doing what you do. And in fact, I'm taking your high impact course, leader course, and trying to figure out how to structure it.
Well, don't let it mess up your mojo. Something's going well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
But so I just find I watch the kids jumping on the trampoline like yesterday, and my wife looks over and I'm reading a 1,200 page book on Churchill called The Last Lion. And I'm reading that, and she's like, what are you reading? The book, you need a sack to carry it around. it's massive, and she's like, 1 minute she looks over and I'm reading that, and the next I'm reading some Vince Flynn nonsense, so it's just read all over the place stuff that interests me. And I just build it into the kind of the normal rhythm of sitting around. I'm not like you where it's like, okay, I'm up from 5:30 till 7:12. I'm reading,
Well, and I think that's really important, is not to try to be somebody you're not. And I think this will be extremely refreshing for leaders who are like, I'm a lot more like Mark. And
right.
So what
want to go to a movie when I'm sitting in an elder meeting? It's like, we should just back this up. I think we'll just go to the movie theater and hang out. So
you're pretty fluid in your calendar and pretty open.
Yeah, well, not fluid in my calendar. My assistant keeps my calendar pretty tight, as you teach us to do. So that's pretty structured from Tuesday.
So what's a typical week look like for you? I'm just curious.
No, Tuesday meetings all day.
How do you feel at the end of it? Are you dead? When I did meetings all day, I was ready for the cemetery.
Yeah, no, I don't mind meetings as long as it's stuff that's like, hey, we're working on stuff, right? So it's if we're trying to crack Calgary, then that's an interesting meeting.
I got all time for that.
Yeah, if we're talking about what buckets to order that the ushers can hang out with, or hand out on a Sunday, it's like I'm jumping out the window. Yeah. So I'm not in that I don't want to be, but stuff that's like, okay, this is going to move the dial. Right. I love those meetings, and I could do those. So Tuesday's that, half of Wednesday's that, bit of sermon time, or all day Wednesday's that, bit of sermon, and then first half of the day Thursday is meetings as well. So pretty well all meetings, staff.
So 2.5 days of meetings.
Yep. And then Thursday afternoon and Friday is sermon prep. So Thursday afternoon about 12 or 1. I'm a expositional preacher, so just through Bible books. So I open up the commentary on wherever I happened to end last week, verse 17b, and I opened up the commentary to 17c, and where are we starting? So I got about 5 or 6 commentaries laid out on my desk, and that's Thursday afternoon. And then Friday, I try to pump out a manuscript, pretty well word for word. Usually ends up about 12 or 13 pages, and then I'm done. 5 o'clock Friday, go home, hang out. Saturday at 5 p.m. Go back up to my room, say goodbye to my family, and I get that document down to about 4 pages, and then I memorize it till midnight. And then I'm up at 5 a.m. memorizing again and preach at 8 a.m. So
yeah, that's crazy. And you're working week of, correct?
Week of, yeah, I have. Yeah. That's the only way I can survive. I can't think like you guys are amazing who can like write sermons a month in advance or whatever. It's like, no way.
It's biting me right now. I wrote Sundays like a month and a half ago, and I looked at it today, and it is like a dead fish. I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking?
Oh, this is garbage.
I got a flight to Tulsa tomorrow, there you go. So I'm gonna like try to reresurrect it. And I think you pray more if you prepare ahead of time because you can't remember what you're gonna say.
True.
But
so, it's tough. If something comes up, I'm sweating.
Yeah, like what if you get a funeral or you don't do a lot of weddings, I would think at this point. What so in terms of your creative arts team, are they on, like, I know, and I won't name names, but I know someone else who leads a very large church, 6,000-7,000 people, and like he's finishing his message, I'm not kidding, 2:00 in the morning. And his creative arts team and production team will be getting instructions at 3 or 4 a.m. on a Sunday. And, I just, my team will quit. I know that.
Yeah. So the way that we do it is, we basically only do really creative kind of type things around major series. So like The Problem of God, we'll do something. And if we do something after Easter, other than that, the team kind of can look ahead and go, here's some themes that seem to be coming out of the verses that he's going to preach on this week. And maybe we should choose songs that's some way connect to that. But they have no idea, of course, where I'm going to go. So I could...
Well, you don't know where you're going to go.
They could read the whole prodigal son parable and go, I know what to do songs about, and prep them all. And I literally get to verse 1. I'm like, all right, tax collectors and sinners. Let's talk about that for 40 minutes. They're like, what? We never sang about, So it's a bit of a, for them, it's not probably the best. They would love some more heads up, but we just roll with it. It all comes together. Carey, I literally learned the songs that we're going to be singing that Sunday at the meeting on Sunday morning at 10 to 8.
Oh, yeah, I'm the same way now. Yeah. Sometimes I don't even know the songs. I don't go to all the meetings anymore, and it'll be like, we're singing what? Is this even like...
What is this? Yeah, you're in the audience going, that's heresy. Or cut that for the next service.
We'll be meeting about that on Monday.
That's New Age. Who wrote that? We don't sing to flowers, guys. That's not a thing. And it's always been that way. The worship guys do their own thing, and I do my thing, and it comes together beautifully because at the end of the day, we're a gospel-centered, church that wants to preach about Jesus and the cross and the resurrection. And, if I'm in that zone, which I am every week pretty well, no matter what passage I'm preaching, and they're singing stuff around that and doing creative pieces around that, then, everything comes together.
So super nerdy question, because I remember this in the green room at our conference earlier this year. You use the large size iPad Pro, and what is the app? I downloaded it, but I haven't used it yet. What do you use?
It's called Top Notes. So Top Notes. I write the manuscript out, save it as a PDF, and then email it to myself, and then open it in Top Notes, and then that way you got your Apple Pencil out, and you can do all your circling, underlining, highlighting, colors, and all that stuff.
And do you walk into the message with your iPad, or you just kind of freewheel it, don't you? Oh yeah.
Yeah,
you don't use it a lot.
No, the iPad's on the pulpit. They're for quotes and, as Keller says, the Linus
Emergencies.
blanket. Yeah, in case the whole place starts to burn down and you forget where you were. But to get there, and I love to talk to preachers about this because they look at, different communicators and they think, oh, it's just, they either say it's gifting, which is, an interesting way to shuck off responsibility. Or they're just naturally, it's just who they are or whatever, and they're winging it. And I like to bring them into my process because it's anything but winging it. It's painful. It's sermon prep for me. Someone asked me this the other day. They said, do you like it? And I said, no, I actually don't. It's the most painful part of my job is preaching and prepping sermons. I actually don't like it. And they said, but you look like you're having so much fun. It's like, yeah, but you didn't see me at 5 p.m. Saturday when I had to walk away from my family and stare at the exact same 4 pages for 4 hours so I could memorize it in my brain, so I could get up and not use notes and communicate, deep ideas in a way that's trying to be compelling and interesting to people and whatever. And to do that multiple times, it's draining. It's a process that it's just terrible at times.
I get that. It's a love-hate relationship. I really do. I don't know whether you find this or not, but I find like the idea stage of what I'm going to do next, and I come up with series and everything, but the idea stage is really interesting. Like this is July, I'm working on September. We just changed the Runaway series title to The Great Escape. And it's this idea that escaping I forget what we came up with today, but it was really good. But then I have to actually write it. And that's where it gets a little more complicated through the book of Jonah. I'm going to do the whole thing. Right. And then, there's the last 20% of writing, right? Which is like, And then there's the nerves on Sunday morning about, this is crap. And, I overwrite.
I just want to get in my car and drive away.
Yeah. And sometimes I almost have. It's just like, can we run Andy today? Can we just run Andy? That would be better. You don't have that backup plan yet. No. Anyway. And then I love having preached, and I'm always surprised to see what God uses. And other times I think He's knocked it out of the park. But you have a unique gift because I have seen your notes and I've seen you prepare, and it is manuscripted. It is like you are highlighting this and writing over top of that and like right down to it. But when you're up there, it looks like you're freewheeling it, and that's a sign of somebody who really has a gift but has honed it. When you make it look easy, it's a sign that you've really hustled on it.
Yeah, but I like to definitely give the message that it's hours of work, and especially in Canada, this too. It's a lot of preaching. It's not as quality as it could be, and sometimes I really do think it's just lack of the hours. Gladwell with his 10,000 hours to become a master at stuff. It's like you got to be putting in those hours, or the preaching quality won't be very good.
Well, and preaching in and out to the same church. I mean, I do a lot of conference speaking. You're getting into conference speaking. It's pretty easy to go and, tell your best stories to a group you'll never see again.
Oh, yeah.
And use all the jokes that that work. And then you're like, I've been doing this for 22 years. You've been doing this for 7.5. You just can't say the same thing over and over again. Right? So, sorry, that's a little preacher's rant for all of you who preach. Or maybe it's creating some empathy for preachers. For church staff and other people who attend church and leaders who attend church. Mark, I got to ask you one more question. This has been a great conversation, and I'm so thankful for you and for how God is using you in Canada and now beyond with this book. And you've spoken in a lot of American churches. You're good friends with Larry Osborne, who's been on this podcast, will be again. He's got a new book coming out, I think. He texted me the other day. So anyway, it's great stuff. But other than the grace of God, what would you attribute the explosive growth of Village Church, which, in 7 years has grown to 5,000 people. You're rolling out locations across Canada now, and you're reaching largely unchurched, dechurched people. What would you say, when you look at as far as we can control things, some things that are best practices for you?
Well, it comes back to what we were talking about. Communication is always crucial. The church cannot downplay. I know, the missional movement, a beautiful movement about pushing the church back into the everyday, is key to reaching people. Acts 2, people coming to faith, day in and day out, not on on a Sunday, but on a Wednesday, on a Thursday afternoon. But that gathering moment, we don't want to take away from the quality of what God and the people in Canada and the U.S. deserve by way of that gathering. And so it should be the best quality we can do. We have the best message in the world, and the communicator needs to work tirelessly to make that the best it can be, but also not abandon the theological integrity of that. Constantly preaching to unchurched, de-churched people, skeptics with the kind of questions that I raise in the book, those 10 questions, read those and go, how does the text this week actually speak to that? So I'm constantly, every sermon, I'm reading the passage through the filter of an unchurched person. Because over time, even if you don't have unchurched people, like let's say you have a congregation of 100 people, and you know every one of their names and you baptize them all and they're all Christians, still get up and say, now, for God so loved the world. Okay, let's stop there for a second. How do you if you're a Buddhist and you're sitting here right now and a friend brought you, you think when I read the word God, you think this. But here's why it's not that. And then you kind of do an aside for 2 minutes. And then, for God so loved the world. Okay, wait, in our romantic culture, we use the word love this way. But you're constantly in conversation with the people. Over time, even if you know those people aren't sitting there, over time they will be sitting there because you create that culture. That's what I think is really hitting with the post-Christian culture that I exist within. And so, Keller would put it, you preach the gospel constantly to the older brother and the younger brother, talking about the prodigal son. You got people there who are the younger brother, out doing their thing, atheist, agnostic, they don't care. And the gospel's about a father who runs out to them. And you got the older brother, the religious type who's never done anything wrong, sitting in the crowd too. They've gone to church their whole life. And the gospel's for them. It's a father who goes out and says, hey, come on into the party. And then he's the one, of course, at the end who doesn't come in. And so those guys need the gospel, just as much or more. Every sermon needs to be a call to both those groups of people. And so anyway, we attribute it to that clarity, that hard work of worship and word and building community, and then getting people on mission and getting people serving, not letting people just consume of religious goods and services, doing our best to connect to culture. And it's like, hey, if you've been at Village for 4 weeks and you're a Christian and you're not giving and in a community group and serving, what are you doing? You're just taking up space. You're weighing us down. You need to get on mission or go back to whatever church you came from. And people are like, my gosh, she talks to us like that. I got to go bring a friend, And so it's like this opposite of what we thought would work in Canada. You're supposed to talk in pear-shaped tones and just suggest things to everybody. And we're just in a dialogue. We're just dialoguing. I don't have truth. I just have ideas and you have ideas and we're all the ideas. And it's like, what? No, proclaim it, man. Whitfield wasn't going, hey, we all have ideas. Let's all talk about it. Jonathan Edwards wasn't sitting. That's
fantastic.
Not these guys proclaimed. Spurgeon wasn't up there suggesting. So anyway, I think
and that I want people to hear that. I mean, you look at what's happening in areas that are not, church central, and often it's the boldness of preachers that will get people's attention. And you think you've got to tiptoe around the culture. You really don't. Sometimes you just call the culture to account and
the prophetic voice. But to do it, and this is the balance, is people hear that and then they go, okay, I'm going to go do that. And they go scream at everybody in their church, goes down to 8 people. Because it's not, there's a spirit and a heart and a way of doing it where people can see that you actually care about them. And so if you're calling out with a kind of a prophetic voice to the things of a culture and you're doing it with love and empathy, there's something different about that than the guy foaming at the mouth, fundamentalist, screaming and yelling, pounding things against the table. There's a way of doing it that I think you got to capture the spirit of Jesus while you're doing it. The grace and truth thing, right? That Andy Stanley talks about.
Well, and you can't be somebody else. You and I, we're friends. We admire what each other are doing at our churches. But if I try to be you, and I mean, I really admire the way you speak. I love your sense of humor. I love the way you call people out. If I do that, it comes across as just inauthentic or awkward. Or if you try to be me, if you try to, hey, I got up and worked from 5 a.m. to 7:12, you could be divorced.
Now I hate all of you. Yeah.
Now I hate all of you. Yeah.
Or if I try to, like, you put that stuff up on the screen and you have like points and all that. Like I couldn't follow points if it, it's mind boggling how you do that.
Oh yeah.
So
to me,
I would
it's
fumble
like,
it hard.
that's my little Linus blanket. That's my
Sure, yeah.
well, Andy teaches that way. I've done it in different ways, but it's consistency as a North Point partner. Got to be you.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing, we're coming into the home stretch. This has been so great. This is part of my hope for the podcast is, just these green room conversations that just happen to come to life that a few people get to hear. Church planters, you got a lot listening right now, people who are involved in church plants, people who are leading them. You've had a very successful church plant by all accounts. A couple of pieces of advice for church planters.
Yeah. Again, work on your communication craft. All leaders are going to have an influence today in that
So when you were
context.
starting out, like right now, you're spending a day and a half on it. But when you were starting out, when Village Church was, 30 people, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, you were still really polishing your communication craft.
Oh, I actually probably worked harder back then than I do now.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was because the other thing is and maybe, I wouldn't say this is gospel. I don't know what you would think about this, but education is an interesting conversation because that's my back. So I had all this stuff in the background of my life, the scholarship, the stuff I'd done. I don't bring it into the pulpit, but it's there. And people can tell when they're listening to you that you're kind of an iceberg. And whatever you're talking about on this topic, you're like sharing the conclusions of it, but it's not all you've got on that topic. There's something below the surface that people can sense. And that's, for me, it was 10 years of education of literally 3 years of Greek, New Testament scholarship, sitting in libraries, loving footnotes, So just as much as you're going to read Seth Godin and the latest How to Connect to People thing, you got to be in the library reading, Packer
Augustine.
and Grudem and Augustine and Donald Blesh and N.T. Wright and these guys. And people can tell whether that stuff's there or not. So I would say to church planters and preachers, like education, don't just skip that. No, not necessary anymore. I'm just going to jump in and plant a church. It's like, you know what, man? Then you're going to have 4 months of good sermons and you're going to dry up and you're going to be like, you got the long game. You got to do this for 20 years. What are you going to talk about if you have no education? And I see guys who just want to skip the education and they don't. And here's the thing about education, why I'm a fan of it, because it's not about, it teaches you how to think. And that's what's going to keep you for 20, 30 years, writing good sermons, preaching, teaching, getting credibility with other people. You have to learn how to think. Not what to think, how to think. And that's crucial.
I was a lawyer, as some people know, before I was a pastor. And people used to ask me, particularly, shortly after I left law, do you ever
you're going to say before you were a Christian?
Well, that's
Christian
a whole
other
like a
thing.
subject. I'm married to one.
Right.
I think she's way more Christian than I am. Can you be a Christian lawyer? We used to have debates about that.
There's a podcast.
Yeah, there it is. So anyway, people ask me when I started out in ministry, do you ever use your law? And occasionally, I'd look at a contract or something like that and, you get trained for that. And I'd be like, yeah, from time to time. And my answer a decade into it became, you know what, I use my law every day because law school kicked my butt. I went to a really hard law school in Toronto, the law school of my dreams. My grades dropped. I was a straight A student. My grades dropped because it was just so hard. I brought them back up by the time I was done. But like, holy cow, it completely reoriented my brain. And it became the basis of how I approach content. Now, I didn't know I was going to be a writer, a blogger, a podcaster, a preacher, any of that.
Set you up. Yep.
But it set me up. And that is the unique frame from which I see the world. And I'm still drawing on it 20 years later. So I would encourage that. I don't think academics are the be all and the end all, but I think you need the disciplined pursuit of just scholarship, of academics to help you really approach the subject with integrity. And then, what I love about you is somebody with a grade 8 education can totally read your book. Well, assuming, you could with a grade 8 education, you could read the book, but certainly hear you preach every Sunday and not feel like you were shooting over their heads. So Mark, you got any other advice for church planters, just real quick?
Yeah, I think people undervalue the idea of starting with a very strong team. And so there's sometimes kind of this Lone Ranger philosophy of if I'm gifted enough and called enough or, whatever, then I'll just go out there and blaze it. And people, underestimate the quality of team. I started with the most amazing team you can ever imagine, 16 of us, and they were all high-powered people willing to serve their life away and just give their life to the mission. And they're amazing people and gifted, and they all had their role, that kind of Wayne Cordero figure your place out on the battleship. They all knew exactly where they stood on the battleship, and we went pretty hard. And that's why I could survive, having 1,200 people when it was just me, because I had all these this core lay team that was unbelievable, and they would lead the people under them and equip them and all of that. So it was an amazing team. It wasn't just a kind of a Lone Ranger thing, and guys underestimate that, I think.
No, okay, I can't leave it there. I know we've got like 2 minutes to wrap this thing up. We've been over an hour, which is great. But okay, so people are like, where do I get 16 amazing people? Was that just vision casting? Just give us the thumbnail on that.
I walked up to a tax collector and said, "Get off your chair." Where's the Jesus? No.
Thank you, Jesus.
He did great with that. He'd just walk around and pick people.
Yeah.
So I had done young adult ministry at this church for 6 years. And so in that setting, this was a very gracious church. I mean, when they planted me, the church was only probably 300 or 400 people, and it had gone through a lot of hurt and pain. And so to hand me people was very gracious of them. And the people were at that church and they were serving, and they'd been on my young adult leadership teams, and they'd been on the worship teams, and they'd been on the kids teams there. And so they were orbiting pretty closely around me. And so when I kind of proposed the vision of planting, I said, and here's, the 16 people I'd really like to take with me as my leadership team. And the church gave them all to me. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
And what? That's also, they had the confidence in you to be able to do that. I mean, it's easy to look at that story and go, well, I'd love a church to do that. But I would guess that the senior leader of that church only would have done that if he had confidence in you. Okay, well, Mark, this is so clear to me. This is why I love hanging out with you. This is why I love being able to do the podcast. This could be another hour, and maybe next time it will be. But in the meantime, you're running between meetings, and I would love to, for people, I know they're going to want to get the book. They're going to want to find out more about you and Village Church. So give us some interwebular addresses.
Wow. You just invent that word.
I made that word up. I did.
That's great. That's great.
What happens.
Yeah. So the book is available right now on Amazon, both .ca and .com. The Problem of God, just type it in my name, Mark Clark, and it's there for pre-order right now. And actually, if you pre-order it, you get other stuff. There's like a small group guide that you can get that has questions, 3 or 4 questions for all 10 chapters that you can use. Really, the whole heart behind the book is to buy 3 or 4 copies, give them to your skeptical, non-Christian friends, and then just grab a coffee with them every week or whatever whatever you like to gather around, and say, hey, you read that chapter on science? Here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? Hey, you read that chapter on sex or hell or whatever? So really that's how it's, would work really well. So, and so Amazon, the website is called theproblemofgod.com, and it just kind of introduces me and the concept of the book. And then, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff, and have a author page there that you can look up, Mark Clark. So I'm on all those things. And the church podcast is Village Church Sermons. And so we got the sermon podcast out there for people to listen to. So not
the Village Church, just Village Church.
Just Village Church, straight
that
up.
Other church.
That's right. Yeah. People are always like, oh, you're at the Village Church. And then I was like, no, it's, but obviously it's a pretty famous name for churches now.
Yeah.
It wasn't as famous when I was thinking it up 8 or 9 years ago, but it is now.
Exactly. Isn't that how it works? Yeah, Mark, this has been fantastic. I want to thank you so much. Just thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for the difference you're making. And I know you've helped a lot of leaders today. Appreciate you.
Cool. Thank you for having me on, Carey. I really appreciate it, man. You're doing an awesome job.
Well, that was a fascinating conversation with Mark Clark. Our podcast is back to its regular format again real soon. But don't miss the launch of Problem of God at Connexus Church, Sunday, January 14th at 9 and 10:30 a.m. at our locations in Barrie, Aurelia, and now Midland. And you can find out more at connexuschurch.com. We would love to have you bring your friends and bring your questions because we're going to engage them as best we can.